Check the URL. Every web page has a unique address called a URL, or Uniform Resource Locator. The main part of a page's URL can sometimes give you a start on determining whether it's a good source. In particular, a page with a .gov or .edu extension is more likely to come from a credible source. A website with a .gov extension, like www.ed.gov, may be used only by a United States government agency. A website with a .edu extension, like www.umich.edu, may be used only by a college or university. However, .edu sites sometimes also host the personal content of professors or students, so you will need to explore carefully. Other common extensions include .org, .com, and .net, among many others. Although .org and .com were originally intended to indicate nonprofit and for-profit status respectively, there are no rules in place to enforce this distinction, so you can't make any assumptions based on a .org or .com address. You will need to delve further to find out who owns the source. Check the perimeter. When you're assessing a website for credibility, the information you need is often found around the edges of the page, especially the very top and very bottom. Take a look at this example, an abstract for an article about testing in schools. A quick glance at the top of the page gives you some information about who is responsible for its content. It's produced by Education Policy Initiative, and the logo on the right is for the University of Michigan, so you know right away that this site is probably a good authority on the subject. You also know that this is likely to be an unbiased source of information on this topic. Educational institutions usually exist to do research and share information, not to advance a certain viewpoint or sell a product. There are clear and straightforward navigation options, including an About Us link. Moving down the page, we see some other important information. There's a date to indicate when the content was published. The author's name is given, along with a link to more information about his affiliation and credentials. When we open the PDF of the article, we see it includes a list of references from scholarly and government sources. There are many elements present to support this being a credible source for academic research. Now let's look at a second web page on the same topic of testing in schools. The top of the page tells us that the website belongs to the Association of Test Publishers. No author is named. Think about how the publisher here relates to the topic at hand. Does the publisher have authority? What about bias? Now let's move to the bottom of the page. Scanning the text of the article, we see phrases like, "most experts would agree," and references to the work of independent researchers. But no citations or links are provided to support the author's assertions. And there's no indication that this content has been reviewed or edited by a peer in the field. These things don't mean that there's necessarily anything incorrect or untrue in the article we're looking at. It simply means that we can't tell. While this company may have some authority in the field, it is inherently biased, and it hasn't provided any sources to back up the statements in the article. So our assessment of this source tells us that it's not appropriate for use in academic research. Next steps. Have you thought any more about the question we asked at the beginning of this module? Which source would you trust the most for information about a hurricane? Facebook, the evening news, or the website of the National Weather Service? Now that you've learned how to establish credibility, the answer may be clearer to you. Next, we're going to move into a few practice activities related to what you've just learned. Then you'll check yourself by taking a quiz on what you've learned in Module 2. After you've completed these activities, it's time to move on to Module 3, where you will learn how to cite these sources in your academic papers.